We sacrifice our own families on the altar of these medical doctors. And Dr. Blaylock is a medical doctor. I'm not going to go through his giant bio. Read it at BlaylockReport.com. But I wanted to get you on, sir, to talk about this issue because now we've got brain disorders, as you know, exploding. You got people at 30 years old getting Alzheimer-type diseases, Guillain-Barré exploding, people having epilepsy exploding, narcolepsy exploding. The media admits linked to vaccines. But you define and written some of the most prestigious papers decades ago that are now mainline science on chronic brain inflammation. So let's start with the statin drugs and Alzheimer's, Dr. Blaylock.
Thank you, Alex. A good introduction. The statin drugs have been known to be troublemakers from the very beginning when they were first manufactured almost 20 years ago. Now, the promise was that when this was our major weapon against heart disease, it was just so impressive, we were going to slash heart disease. Well, 20 years later, the incidence of death from heart disease has not changed at all, or very low. If what they were telling as propaganda, and it's pure propaganda, not medical science, was true, it should have slipped to at least third or fourth in the incidence of death.
So, Doctor, that means it's gotten worse because, what, about half the people that were smokers since then are not smokers, and that's, yeah.
Yeah, so it was a lie from the very beginning. Well, then when the statisticians started looking at what they were quoting in their advertising, which they advertise in every TV program and popular magazine, when they started looking at statistics, they said, well, you know, these are doctored statistics. That literally they're true, but when you look at the actual reduction in heart attacks, it's no more than 1 or 2%. But because they manipulate the numbers, which you know I show in my newsletter, it comes out 30%. 36% reduction in heart attacks.
But is it the 1 or 2 because there's been a massive reduction in cigarette smoking?
Well, yeah, that's played a big role, and people are more often exercising and changing their diet. But they leave that out of these statistics. You know, they're just taking the raw statistics. Well, you read the major papers that they constantly quote, they leave out things in the conclusion of the paper. And we're seeing this more and more, is that the conclusion of the paper does not match the data that's in the paper. Well, most practicing physicians do not read the data in a scientific paper. They read the introduction and they read the conclusion. A lot just read the abstract. Well, if you read the paper, for instance, one of the often quoted papers said that there was increased death from brain hemorrhages. That is never even mentioned in the conclusion of the article. Well, I think that's kind of important. Well, there's a research article in which looked and reviewed virtually every paper written about statin drugs since its inception to see what is the complications associated with it, what is the rates of complications, and the seriousness. Well, I reviewed this in one of my newsletters and went through all of them. Well, the list is so long, it's unbelievable. But we have things that vary from muscle weakness, muscle pain, death from a condition that destroys the muscle, including heart muscle, paralysis where they can't even get out of bed, to increased incidence of ALS, which is considered 100% fatal disease. And the effect on the brain and the heart were the two that were really stand out because they're so common. The incidence of heart failure since the introduction of statin drugs has just grown astronomically. Well, a physician looked at this, reviewed the data, and demonstrated that this was because of the statin drugs. Well, the heart is very energy dependent because it's always beating, it never really rests, and it requires high levels of coenzyme Q10 for its energy. Well, the process, the enzyme that produces coenzyme Q10, is also the one that produces cholesterol. This drug blocks that enzyme, so it's not only blocking the production of cholesterol, but also coenzyme Q10. That means the heart now is deprived of its major energy molecule, and so it explains why we're seeing this virtual explosion of heart failure. And it's occurring at an earlier age than it.
And now they're talking about putting statins in water for 3-year-olds and up.
Oh, yeah. Well, you see, they were talking before that, before the water episode, they were telling the pediatricians, you need to start doing lipid studies on all children, and if they have elevated cholesterol, try the diet first, but if their cholesterol doesn't correct, then they should be put on statins for a lifetime.
Unbelievable.
Well, one of the secrets of statins, I wrote about this for years, that the only reason there's any effect of the statins at all is because it's a powerful immune suppressant and it's anti-inflammatory. It has nothing to do with lowering cholesterol. Now they're starting to admit that, even the mainstream journals, because the evidence was just so overwhelming. Well, who would want to take a child, 6 or 7 years of age, and suppress their immunity for their entire life? That's going to have two effects. Number one, it's going to dramatically increase their incidence of cancer. And two, it's going to increase their incidence of infections. And that's going to say, well, we need more vaccination. So they like the idea of producing mass immune suppression, epidemics of infectious diseases, and so the public would agree, oh, we need vaccines to protect our children.
This is, let me stop you. This is so cold-blooded. For those that don't know, obviously you suppress the immune system. It's the immune system that stops cancer. I was reading a paper a few months ago where they said now they've got new tests with a blood test that can pick up cancer markers. But people have got cancer every week that our own body defeats. Now they're going to have millions more people they can rush in with CAT scans that up your chances of cancer. Oh, we found something. Now we've got to put you on chemo. I mean, this is just a cold-blooded business by these people, but think about it.
Well, it is business because it's paying no attention to the science. If you look at the science of cancer, you look at the science of degenerative brain disorders, you look at the science of degenerative heart disorders, it's the exact opposite of what's being done in the medical establishment. It's almost as if they're sabotaging people's health. And when we look at the incidence of disease, we're seeing degenerative brain disorders in young people now. It used to be confined to people in their, at least after age 55. Now we're seeing age 40, age 30, age 20, in growing numbers. Well, as you start putting larger and larger percentages of the population on drugs that are known to suppress the major energy molecule of the body, it's going to have a profound effect on brain function, heart function, and it's going to have a profound effect because of the immune suppressing ability, as we said, on infectious diseases, the fatality from infectious diseases, and it's going to have a major effect on cancer incidence.
All right, we're going to give this video/audio to Ted's father and mother, and probably to the medical doctor as well, because I guess a lot of medical doctors now just believe whatever religious thing they're told by the drug companies. But specifically from the mainline papers, if you can, I know I sprung this on you early in the interview because we're going to talk about some other issues as well today, but if you can quote the papers for them, Dr. Blaylock, or during a break, dig them up for folks so that we can talk about why people are dying of the brain hemorrhages in higher numbers, what it's doing to the brain. I mean, I know as a layman, the brain is 70% water, but the rest of it is predominantly basically a cholesterol base. If I'm wrong, correct me. What is then an anti-cholesterol drug doing to the brain?
Well, we've known for some time that cholesterol is essential for brain function. One of cholesterol's function in the membrane is to prevent damage by free radicals. If you deplete the amount of cholesterol in that membrane, it becomes infinitely more susceptible to damage by free radicals. Well, that's the major cause of most degenerative brain diseases like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, ALS, all of these diseases. So that puts you at increased risk. And it's been known for a long time that if you lower cholesterol below 170 milligrams per deciliter, you're going to increase brain hemorrhages. That's accepted. Well, they're now recommending people have their cholesterol down to 140, 130. They have people that come in to their doctor and they have a cholesterol of 220, which is perfectly fine. And they tell them, oh, you need to be on statin drugs. Well, they're 35 years old. They put them on the statin drugs. Next thing you know, they're having severe muscle pains. They're very weak. They can't go to work. They're immune suppressed. They're catching every kind of infection. They go back to their doctor, and their answer is, well, we need to switch you to another statin. The doctor's not even aware of what he's doing, because if you look in the physician's desk reference, which is the reference for all drugs, it says if a patient develops muscle pain or weakness, stop the statin immediately, because that is a early sign of a potentially fatal disease, rhabdomyolysis. I don't know how many patients I hear from that are 70, 80 years old that are on statin drugs, having severe pain in their muscles, severe weakness, and their doctors keep them on statin drugs. And I ask them, why is your doctor keeping you on these drugs when the PDR says that's a prelude to a possible fatal disease? And they say, well, they think that the heart disease is so much more important. Well, the doctor has not reviewed the medical studies. He's just taking the pharmaceutical drug representative's word for it, and the stuff that comes out in the blurbs from the big medical centers that's on the payroll, and he's not reviewing the studies, which say the reduction of heart attacks, even if you accept their numbers, is no better than taking an aspirin a day. That's absolutely proven. You look at the biggest studies done, it is no better than an aspirin a day.
Okay, let me stop you right there, Doctor, because how this all happened is Ted Anderson, that owns the network, introduced me 6 months ago or so to some longevity products. Some of them are similar to some of the products that you've developed, but they deal with these different fatty acids for the brain, just for brain health, these mineral drinks, and with, with the trace elements, the rest of it. And Ted just started testing it out on his dad, and it was immediate. His dad had no short-term memory. They'd be fishing. He didn't know he was fishing. Suddenly, it's like his dad is back just from some fatty acid pills and a mineral drink, and there's no doubt in his mind that's happening. Now he's trying to get him off of the statins because he's read your literature, he's read the papers, and even when doctors are confronted with this, they don't want the information. Is that because a lot of these medical doctors don't want to admit they've been wrong, or that Big Pharma could be evil? It's like a lot of doctors will say, there's no mercury in that shot, and you show them, here it is on the on the ampule, and they go, oh, I guess it is in there. I mean, what's going on with these doctors, and what would you tell somebody? Or let's say if your family member, your father had Alzheimer's, and they were on statins, what would you do?
Oh, I would never put anybody on the statin. I wouldn't use a statin for anybody. If you know the complications from statin, for instance, the incidence of peripheral neuropathy, which could be crippling, severe pains and motor loss in your legs, arms, the incidence on a statin is 14 times higher than occurs normally. Now, that is incredible. That's 1,400% increase in peripheral neuropathy, a crippling disorder, neurological disorder. It is accepted as being caused by statin drugs. Well, that was at the lower dose. Since those articles were written, they've doubled the dose of statin. So we're going to see a lot more peripheral neuropathy. Well, average patients go to their doctor with peripheral neuropathy after being on statins. He's not even aware it's linked.
So you're saying Alzheimer's in many cases is just a name for the effects of statins and other things?
No, Alzheimer's is a specific disease, but you increase the risk of degeneration of the brain by being on statins.
So what you're saying is it removes the
protection.
So it weakens the blood-brain barrier membrane.
Well, it weakens the membranes of the brain cells and the synapses and the dendrite. When you look at Alzheimer's disease, the first change that occurs decades ahead of time is a loss of synapses, the synaptic connection, not the death of the brain cells. That's a very late effect. So a lot of people with Alzheimer's disease they're having a problem with their memory and orientation, etc., they have a reversible condition if you change things. And we're starting to see some of the things that you do nutritionally seems to certainly slow the disease dramatically. Well, statin drugs, just by their mode of operation, can accelerate the problem because it makes that synapse even more vulnerable. And so, from what we know of neuroscience and the neurochemistry involved, it's absolutely insane to put a person that's at risk of a neurological disease on a statin drug.
All right, amazing. Stay there. Stay there, Dr. Blaylock. Let's talk about nutritional things that you've seen help people who have Alzheimer's. Okay. And by the way, if you want to check out the incredible reports, the newsletters, the mainline studies, the drug inserts they don't want you to see, go to RussellBlaylockMD.com or BlaylockWellnessCenter.com to check that out. Continuing, sir, finishing up with the statins and what they're doing in the system, knowing this and how doctors can be so ignorant. Then I want to shift gears. I mentioned this to you. It just came out today, but you were already informed about it. School districts trying to get kids to take all the vaccines, where they tried to hoax people and say were mandatory. They're now saying, we'll put you on a raffle for a free iPhone or iPad if you get all your shots. So just amazing predator-type action to get these kids to take these dangerous vaccines. But let's finish up. Dr. Blaylock, again, top retired brain surgeon and big researcher into the brain, researched and coined terms like as cytotoxins, now in the mainline literature decades ago, terms like chronic brain inflammation. That's what he breaks down Alzheimer's really is. And the system knowingly, and he gets into the eugenics and their own documents on that in his research, the social engineers know what's happening. They've got an aging population, the baby boomers. They want to get rid of you folks so they can keep all that tax money, all that Social Security money for themselves. But I'm now ranting. Dr. Blaylock, you've got the floor for the balance of this hour. Break down the rest of what's really causing this epidemic of brain degeneration, the Alzheimer's, the statins. Then let's get into vaccines and your big reports you've got out dealing with radio protection, dealing with radioactivity, and some of the nutrients and things that can help protect the body from that. Dr. Blaylock.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. Thing that, I try to observe particularly what could be causing this dramatic increase in neurological disorders as well as cardiovascular disorders. And we're seeing a number of things. The statin push is one big thing because it's attacking the energy supply of the brain and the heart and the necessity of cholesterol at a certain level. It defies their own research, and this is what's so shocking about it, is if you look at the major studies that are constantly quoted, they don't say what they're telling the public they say. It's often saying the opposite. If you look at the data itself, there's a Dr. Beatrice Golem, who I met and talked with, and she's written a number of incredible articles on statin drugs. It's the best review articles you can find, the most extensive. And she convincingly shows this is an extremely dangerous disease, drug, and that it's being hyped as doing things that it's just not doing. But we've got a medical system here in the United States particularly, which is just dominated by the pharmaceutical manufacturers. Our physicians are leaving their educational systems and their residency training just heavily brainwashed by pharmaceutical companies, and they don't really realize it. You would think, for instance, someone who spent their life studying brain function could approach a general practitioner and explain these things to them, and they would understand it and stop prescribing prescribing the statin drug. But they look at you like you're crazy, and you say, well, what I know about the brain far exceeds what you know. But you won't listen to me. You listen to a pharmaceutical company. I show you the very articles you're quoting and how they're contradictory. You still won't listen. And they take these people like the mother you're talking about, and they terrify them, telling them, if we don't get that cholesterol down to 140, if they get off this drug, they're going to die. And yet you look at the statistics of the papers they quote, it does not say that. I tell people all the time, you go to the doctor and you ask the doctor, now, I don't want to hear any statistics except what is the benefit I will get from this drug if it works perfectly? Well, at best, could tell that patient, well, it might reduce your risk of dying of a heart attack 1 or possibly 2%. That means you have a 98%, 99% chance you're not going to die from a heart attack. And that drug is not going to help you. People don't know that. They have the idea, and I've even had physicians tell them, if you don't take this drug, you're going to die of a heart attack. It's just like with the HPV vaccine that they advertise. They tell these young girls, if you don't get this vaccine, you're going to die of cervical cancer. Well, cervical cancer is extremely rare in this country. The chances of a young girl dying of cervical cancer, she's more likely to get hit by lightning. But they're purposely manipulating statistics and data and studies to terrify people into taking drugs and vaccines. Now, I attended a vaccine safety conference recently with some of the top scientists in the world, experts on adjuvants like aluminum. And we all got together and gave lectures. There was no audience. It was just the people doing the studies in this area. The danger of these adjuvants in vaccines is just enormous. The damage to the brain is incredible. It is completely being covered up. The public has no idea how dangerous these vaccines are. And to vaccinate these children with 36 vaccines before they start school is incredible. The United States has the highest mortality in children age 5 and below of anywhere in the developed world because we have the highest incidence of vaccination in the entire world. Next is Britain. It has an extremely high mortality rate. So if you look at the mortality rate of the infant and the child up to age 5 in the world, it's directly correlated with the number of vaccines they receive early in life. But we're just giving an unprecedented number of vaccines. It's unbelievable. And if you look at the neuroscience literature, it tells you, you do that, you're going to damage a lot of brains. And that's what's happening in this country. You know, I'm on the faculty of biology at a local university, and the head of the biology department told me, he said, now you have to realize students today are not like when you were in school. He said, they're really not able to handle this much information anymore. He said, you have to kind of dumb it down. It is shocking to think that students now cannot think as well as they did 40 years ago. So we're seeing this massive dumbing down of our youth, a massive increase in neurological disorders, even in young people, and it's just being swept under the rug. And, of course, it's not going to be in any popular magazine. It's not going to be on any network because they receive millions of dollars in advertising from pharmaceutical companies.
Well, I want to stop you, Doctor. Now they're coming out with more and more vaccines that Big Pharma lobbies to, quote, make mandatory. That itself is a hoax. There's no law you have to take them. Now as the people learn about this, and record lows have taken the flu shots, as you know, the last 3 years, and we've been vindicated that they had to ban it in England for under 5s because of a, quote, 10-fold increase in convulsions. Guys, search 10-fold increase. Britain bans flu jab at under 5s, 10-fold increase. I want to show folks those headlines. They won't believe it. All of that's come out. So clearly, and I've talked to you about this before on and off air, the system at the top knows what they're doing. It's very cold-blooded, and it transcends just profits. It's like Bayer Pharmaceutical, lost in federal court, also lost in France, for a decade plus, knowingly shipped out factor VIII that had hepatitis and HIV in it. That's where they pool, again, masses of different blood types together, extract the platelets, for folks that don't know. There's the London Telegraph headline, flu jab linked to fits and under 5s officials, and fits are what they call convulsions in England. Then you read it says was linked to a 10-fold increase in convulsions. So they know what they're doing at the top. The average doctor buys into the evil through ignorance. Once they see the facts, they don't want to admit they're wrong. It's cognitive dissonance. And now, I mean, I have to tell you, my dad, top of his class, super smart, could do all the calculus and everything else super simple. Rest of my family really smart. I don't think I'm as smart as they are. I try to talk to the general public, even professionals, and it's like they're in a daze, they're in a trance, they're slow. I've seen statistics that the U.S. IQ has dropped. That's not education for those that don't know. Physically, we're getting dumber. Our sperm count's down by 87%. Every form of diabetes, cancer, brain degeneration, it's off the charts. We're being soft-killed, doctor. This is eugenics. I mean, we have to address what this is. They know full well what they're doing. And it is, I mean, you've got the White House science czar writing a 1,100-page book saying we need to put stuff in the water to sterilize people. I mean, these are a group of maniacs.
Well, you know, just the vaccine thing, with this H1N1, they had an increase in narcolepsy in these young children of 9-fold. Well, narcolepsy is a terrible disorder. I mean, it'll ruin your life. There's no justification for having ruined those child's lives when their own data, even from the CDC, showed the effectiveness in the child was nil. The whole thing was a hoax. And, you know, we said that on your program. This is a hoax. Don't listen to it. Well, what happened? The World Health Organization said, well, it wasn't a pandemic, which means it was a hoax. And it was a cruel hoax because it has now ruined the lives of tens of thousands of children. And you'd have to multiply that at least by a factor of 10-fold, maybe 100-fold. I would estimate there are tens of millions of children whose lives have been ruined by this vaccine and the other vaccine. The thing is parents don't know any different, so when Junior becomes a behavioral problem or develops a seizure or develops abnormal behavior, psychosis, suicide, they don't have a clue that could be related to the vaccine. And if they do and they go to their doctor and say, doctor, could this be due to the vaccine that my child is now having this behavioral problem? He assures them no. But when I go to that doctor and I said, doctor, do you know what a vaccine does to the microglia in the brain? He said, what's a microglia? Well, you know, if you're vaccinating children with these powerful adjuvants in mass doses, and you don't know that massively activates one of the primary immune cells in the brain and produces chronic brain inflammation and disrupts the formation of the brain, you shouldn't be given the vaccine. And that's what we have in this country.
And by the way, doctor, I'm no rocket scientist, but I know how to read the vaccine inserts. It says it on the stinking things.
Well, I mean, there's so much literature in the neuroscience literature, the effect of powerful activation of the systemic immunity and its effect on the brain. To do what they're doing to these children is absolute insanity. Now, the toxicity of the aluminum in the vaccine is enormous. We have so much literature on it. I heard from some of the top experts in the world on aluminum toxicity at this meeting. We all took turns lecturing and talking about this. There's no question that aluminum is disrupting the development of these children's brains. Aluminum is an enormous brain toxin. It's almost as bad as mercury. When you have both, you have synergistic toxicity to the brain, which is incredible.
So none of us should be eating off aluminum or drinking out of aluminum cans.
Oh, absolutely. You should avoid aluminum. And it's put in all kinds of over-the-counter medications, sun blockers, stuff they rub on their skin that's absorbed into the skin. And now what they're doing with aluminum is nano-sizing aluminum. Well, I did an aluminum...
Stay there, doctor. This is too incredible. By the way, in just the last 2 years, the White House has come out. The Council on Foreign Relations has put out a geoengineering report saying, yeah, we've been doing testing all over North America, spraying aluminum dioxide to create nuclei to protect us from global warming. And we, of course, promote the film, What in the World Are They Spraying?, where it shows just incredible levels of aluminum dioxide increasing in areas all over the U.S. and the soil. And we'll put the Council on Foreign Relations PDF back up. You can just search the term Council on Foreign Relations geoengineering, and you'll be at their own website where they admit this has been going on. A guy got a Nobel Prize, in 92 for it. And there's a huge program. We have the patents where it's mixed with the jet fuel, where the companies, the jetliner companies don't even know what they're doing. It then disperses it. Dr. Blaylock, you were raising that during the break. This is admitted to be going on, but we're conspiracy theorists to talk about it.
Well, here's the thing. Just talking about pure science and ignoring the conspiracy part of it. Dropping a nano-sized aluminum from the atmosphere fills the air with this aluminum. If you do that, the aluminum is rapidly absorbed through the olfactory nerve, the smell nerve in the nose, enters the part of the brain that causes Alzheimer's disease, as well as the lungs and the blood. Now, I lectured on the fact of nano-sized aluminum versus regular aluminum at this meeting. And I showed the literature clearly says nano-sized aluminum produces intense brain inflammation and can produce all the changes in the brain that we see with Alzheimer's disease. Now, if these idiots are saturating the atmosphere with aluminum that you're breathing every day in a nano size, which I understand it is nano size, you're going to have an epidemic of degenerative brain disorders like we've never seen before. And to do that over this mythology of global warming is just unbelievable. Also, the nano-aluminum ends up in the soil. The plant takes it up, so when you eat the plant or eat the meat from the cattle that's eating the plant, you're getting high levels of nano-sized aluminum. The fish, everything. They are poisoning the planet on an unprecedented scale, if indeed they're doing this geoengineering, which I think there's evidence, as you said, they are, and they even admitted from what you said in the council.
Absolutely. If you just put into a search engine, I mean, even Time Magazine's, we've been doing tests secretly not to alarm you, but now we're getting ready to go widespread, spraying aluminum dioxide and barium salts on you to shield out the radiation of the sun because of global warming. And then the scientists look at it and go, but this will increase the heat of the earth. And absolutely, they say it's secret testing, but now they've declassified part of it.
Well, the neurological effects on it are just terrifying. You walk outside and you look at these chemtrails, and they're all over Mississippi. I'm just appalled. This is going to, the people that are already in a pre-Alzheimer's state, they're going to have rapidly advancing Alzheimer's. Young people, the children, are going to get enormously high brain levels of aluminum in that part of the brain that's affected. There's no question about it. This is proven. It's just insane, absolutely insane.
It's been proven that all over the country, levels are going off the chart in the soil.
Right. I watched the video in Hawaii, and biologists have measured the aluminum levels, and they've noticed over the last several years it's just progressively increasing at an enormous rate. So you're going to have trouble finding food to eat that's not full of aluminum.
But don't worry, Monsanto's coming out with a whole line of aluminum-resistant plants.
But, if you talk about conspiracy, you have two alternatives. Either there's a conspiracy for population control, or these people are so stupid they should be institutionalized. That's your only choices.
And either way, the same thing. It's hurting us. We'll be right back in 1 minute with Dr. Blaylock. All right, final 5 minutes with Dr. Russell Blaylock, MD. Sitting here listening to him, I've noticed traveling around the country, I've been able to pull up satellite photos of the entire nation and then blow it up from an average day. The chemtrails are mainly over U.S. cities. These aren't like the old contrails that dissipated in a minute or so. I mean, they sit there all day, they turn into cloud banks, and now they admit, there's been a lot of secret testing with this high-altitude, passive aerosol spraying campaign, but we're doing it for your own good to protect the earth. And then I noticed that there are certain areas of the country where they're not doing it, and you notice those are the areas like Wyoming and places where the globalists are all moving and trying to stay. It is beyond evil that this is happening. And when they're chemtrailing heavily, my grandmother has lived here all her life, never had allergies, had them. It's not allergies, folks. It's brain inflammation. When they're chemtrailing heavily, in the middle of the summer at 2,000 feet, ice crystals are impossible there. Everybody gets sick. Everybody's got headaches because they're spraying us. And they think it's very funny. And now you heard Dr. Blaylock, 25, 30-year-olds getting Alzheimer's. It's very funny to them. And it's very enjoyable to these control freaks, these eugenicists. Dr. Blaylock finishing up also, they've raised The federal government has the level of radiation they say is safe. They've reported more explosions and smoke at Fukushima, but that's not even in our news. It's drifting over here, and you've also put out a paper dealing with some of the nutritional things folks can do to protect themselves from this low-level radiation exposure.
Well, I wrote an e-booklet which goes into detail about how to protect yourself. It was originally written about nuclear terrorism, but it applies to medical radiation or this event. But what I did, I spent a good deal of time researching primarily through NASA research. NASA does most of the research on radio protection, how to protect yourself. It rarely enters the general discussion of everybody talks about, well, you need iodine tablets and all that kind of stuff. All iodine does is protect your thyroid. These very dangerous isotopes like cesium-134, 137, strontium-90, they can last in the body because they're incorporated in the bone entire lifetime. And their half-life's 30 years, so your entire life you'll be radiated internally. And that's what happened in Chernobyl. Well, when I looked through what they did in Chernobyl, the American doctors going over there treating them, they used a lot of supplements. For instance, in Chernobyl, they used alpha-lipoic acid and found just dramatic protection of these people, reversals of some of these effects. When they looked at the NASA studies, they'll take animals and expose them to doses of gamma radiation that will kill the animals within 24 hours or less. And, for instance, with ginger, just the extract ginger, they found that if you gave it 5 days before the lethal dose of gamma radiation, they found enormous protection. Over 60-70% of the animals were alive that were given the ginger, and all of them died that didn't get it. So with even enormously high levels, these flavonoids are highly protective. Well, there's a number of them: curcumin, resveratrol, quercetin. All of these are enormously radioprotective. For instance, they did a study on breasts exposed to radiation and found out if you gave curcumin, it reduced the incidence of radiation-induced breast cancer by 70%, which is far more protection than any known drug.
And now we see, I saw this in the news last week, the UN Codex Alimentarius has gone in Europe. They're banning hundreds of over-the-counter minerals and vitamins because Big Pharma knows it's their competition.
Well, yeah, and if you start banning these things that can protect you against these toxins, that's going to increase the mortality and the disease rate, for instance, with the chemtrails, the aluminum.
Well, folks can find that report at your website, and that's BlaylockWellnessCenter.com. Thank you so much, Doctor. Absolutely amazing. Thank you for your public service.
For centuries.